and welcome to this evening's reading by Krista Eastman. I'm Jordan Beachy, an AmeriCorps volunteer at the Center for Literary Arts. First things first, some thanks are in order. The Center for Literary Arts events are made possible by the Allegheny Arts Council, the Community Trust Foundation, and several offices at Frostburg State University, including the Office of the President, the Dean of the College of Liberal Arts and Sciences, and the Department of English and Foreign Languages and Literature. Copies of Eastman's book, The Painted Forest, can be found at Frostburg's favorite bookstore, Main Street Books. If you can't visit the bookstore in person, Fred and the other booksellers will be happy to arrange shipping or delivery for your order. And you can call the bookstore, and I will put the information for the bookstore in the YouTube chat a little later. This evening, we have the distinct privilege of hosting Krista Eastman for our second reading of the Spring 2021 reading series. Eastman's essays have appeared in journals such as Conjunctions, the Georgia Review, and Kenyon Review, and have been named notable by Best American Essays. As I was reading The Painted Forest, I found it to be a much needed book of noticing. As we have become a less agricultural people, we have consequently lost an intimate relationship with our land and our home. Today, home and our relationship with the land is a much more transitory, uninvolved matter. We can circumnavigate the globe in around 40 hours when it used to take about that long to get to the state's capital. We can move to cities thousands of miles away with comparative ease. Home, for many of us, is nothing more than where we happen to turn on the TV at night. In such an environment, what can be said about home and place? Into this transient age, Eastman stops and notices. She explores the inner workings of what it means to belong to a place, of what it means to be from here. She charts a map for fellow travelers and homebodies. She exemplifies how to own and how to reject received traditions about place. And she depicts preservation and change. And she does it all in an arresting union of essay and poetry, inviting us to quiet and insight. Some writers tell us what we should know. Others tell us what we already know. Very few invite us to fresh explorations of what we thought we knew. Krista Eastman is one such writer, and I trust that as she reads for us this evening, we will discover something about her home and be invited to rediscover ours. So please join me in welcoming Krista Eastman.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Jordan. That was a lovely introduction, and thank you to Jennifer Brown and to everyone at the Center for Literary Arts for inviting me for the opportunity to beam into Frostburg, Maryland, like someone from the future. I actually did an online tour of Frostburg this morning to acclimate myself, and I realized that the closest I've been is Morgantown, Virginia. But via the web, I visited the planetarium and the Palace Theater, and I'm now adding those Frostburg sites to my very long list of post-pandemic fantasies or plans. So thank you for that, and I hope that we'll all be seeing more of each other in person on the other side of this very soon. I am primarily an essayist. I write prose. I am someone who's really enamored with the elasticity or the elastic form of the essay because it can contain so many things. So I like to stuff all things into my work, a mix of fiction and nonfiction, and I really like a mode of writing that invites meandering and metaphor and messiness. So my book, The Painted Forest, this little doodad here, draws a lot from my home state of Wisconsin. My writing also tends to sort of attend to power imbalances of class, place, and region. I've come to realize that part of my project has been making art from places or people that don't often appear sort of on a cultural map. I also tend to be better at describing the process of writing than I am my writing, which when it's done, I just feel like is some kind of awkward mystery that I feel kind of squeamish about. So since I really enjoy outsourcing the problem of describing what the heck am I writing is, I'm just going to go ahead and quote the writer Michael Martone. He called The Painted Forest a quote, a book of Midwestern drag, end quote, and a deft dissection of place and the various ways we project and set dress the world around us in order to feel at home. I think I also had a family member call it a little too fancy for me or something like that. But what can you do? So I thought I'd begin with the opening essay of the Painted Forest, which is called Insider's Almanac. And it most closely sort of reflects those things that Jordan was saying in his introduction. It's the essay that most directly sort of takes on the problem of writing about home and the tendency to claim places and form identities around the stories that suit us. So it opens in Wisconsin. Insider's Almanac. One way to share your home is to place it carefully, in a controlled way, onto someone else's map. Ceremoniously staring down at it for your guests also helps impress upon them that a new place unknown to them is right there being born. In an instant like this one, being the insider matters. Are you from here? Yes, you say, and then watch people step back further to study you, to visualize you in whatever watery picture they have of this little known corner from which you come, to decide on what assumptions might offend, to feel suddenly stirred or just off balance on these, the warped boards of your family's century-long passing, this place that might have remained for them an irrelevant slope of soil. This from here, my own admission of provenance, smells of vinegar and clamors to defend. Always it means the fixed seeming mound of Wisconsin's Sauk County, a bit of earth that, despite my travels, I cannot get around, a place whose scar-like settlement, even on my most rational days, I cannot completely discount. This will be the first confession I make, my from here as your uneven ground, the strange ferocity with which any tiller looks over plots of imperfect earth. Sauk County lies in southwestern Wisconsin, on the eastern edge of the Driftless. According to the poetry of geological nomenclature, this area lacks drift, is driftless. This is land left untouched by the most recent North American glaciations that ended here about 10,000 years ago. Here you will not find any of the features typically left in the wake of a glacier's melting back. No grit and gravel or foreign boulders, no perfectly rounded kettle lakes, no sweeping expanses where the ice once scraped the earth flat. Here instead are ancient hills, exposed bedrock more than 500 million years old, river valleys, long and handsome bridges, and the Baraboo River, which twists and turns as if slowly spinning in a skirt, boasting at a slow and languid pace of old age and apathy toward arrival. And of course, where there used to be prairie and savanna, there is now mostly woods and farmland, green, luminescent, and industrial efforts at harvest, reached by roads that must snake up, over, and around the gentle meander of this land. The Driftless has been the site of settler colonialism and Euro-American farming for only a short while, about 200 years, and yet that period has thoroughly rooted itself here, having hunkered down to birth this garden's original sin. My ancestors, that is, made room for themselves, rushing out to the plow on Ho-Chunk land stolen especially for them. In tending the soil, my family tended a myth, the one where a continent offered itself up to them, a magnificent fecund prize, where dispossession was but a small evil in service to a great God-given right. The brownish photographs in my mom's house show generations of this family, people in long white dresses or too large suits, materializing ghost-like before trees and fields, or leaning on the kind of simple whitewashed farmhouses that still punctuate turns on Sauk roads. These are sunburned-looking people with simple hair and shoes and expressions that give little away. The women chastely tote what we call German birthing hips, widely cast and generously enveloped in cushiony rump, the kind of female physiology believed conducive to birthing large farm boys. Eventually, machines start appearing and the photos lighten, turn into snapshots, wash out with sun. Posing casually next to these same machines are the men who look as hard as the steel they steered over and into the land, altering the earth, plowing it under, extracting from it not just a livelihood, but a culture, a way of life. These were the families that knew all the other families living on all the same roads, who married one another or were suspicious of one another, the German Catholics, the Irish Catholics, but who rose every morning to work, whose presence became rooted, workaday, and conversational. She was married to an Anderson, my Grandma Keller would begin while I listened in, there in the kitchen or out on the porch. Okay, that must have been the younger brother of the Donnie Anderson who was in my class, Mom would reply. Yes, says Grandma, slowly as she thinks. See, there were 5 boys in that family and they lived on the old Kinchy farm, the one on the way to Laval. But when they married, they built new towards Lime Ridge, that big red house, you know, at the elbow in the road, just down from the Wintermantles. Oh, sure, Mom says, and then pauses. There's a lot of cancer in that family. Even I, not born until 1979, and am still sometimes there, still counting second cousins, still looking in. So now I'm going to skip over a bunch of stuff and just read one more section from this essay that is also more about what I'm calling the problem of depiction or the problem of claiming. Claiming land for yourself is difficult to do without also exposing your depictions of ownership as false, unjustified, or incomplete, incapable of holding all the land's contradictions at once, too rooted perhaps in the vantage point afforded by your blindly digging fingers, the pull of your own stomach. And yet there are some practical reasons for making the attempt. For example, others will define what you will not. They will draw you in the kind of broad strokes that make the little lie of nostalgia glorious to behold. Here, the small grocery. There, a man they call salt of the earth. Here, the crumbling red barn. There, the Holstein standing against a blue sky, placed like a bygone portrait on the spine of that ridge. Of course, holding the desperate power of the one who can define, she who is from here and so appoints herself, doesn't preclude the possibility of hypocritical reversals, when suddenly the insider can also invent any number of convenient lies, tall tales extolling seemingly regional virtues. Wheels of cheese large as Buicks roll into town each Saturday. The air, it smells fresh and sweet and is laden with the preponderance of honesty doing all this small town sweat. From here, she will say, an axe hitting the block of her province each time. Hands gritty with this problem of depiction, with the controversy of claiming a place for one's own, I begin to touch other questions. Defining this nowhere, this elsewhere Wisconsin, may require language that allows for contradiction, language that exposes the frequent error of my remarks. It may require tempering my guttural assertions with occasions of polite and reasoned awareness, learned acknowledgments of a larger point of view. And yet these diplomatic allowances cannot sweep away that something still there, that question I might never get around. Who will count as being acquainted with the world in which he lives? probing the quality of one's most basic connections to hills, to family, to centuries of their interweaving, risks and unraveling is difficult to do. Standing with your feet still wrapped in the sheen of non-native crops, affiliation with one's land can seem knee-deep, a thing unto itself, so apparent it's only disclosed from time to time in subtle nods to the neighbor met on the road. He who also owns and works and cultivates, he who also makes claims on slopes not so far from here. He who knows that if connection to land were judged in knowing nods to his neighbor, he'd emerge from the scrutiny of all measurements, an undisputed Earth King, widely known and well-liked, custodian of common cause. So, those were a couple excerpts. And now I think I'll read one of the shorter essays in the book in its entirety. And this one is an essay entitled My Youth. In 2003, when I was young and throwing myself for the first time onto America's churning, the Hummer, like a boulder on parade, rolled through the streets, a symbol of US power and might. The largest civilian vehicle ever manufactured and sold, the rumbling bulk of its body wanted people to know and admire its strength. I am not, it said, without saying anything at all, a Frenchman in tight black pants. Indeed, the Hummer would never skirt around cafe tables with the litheness of a hungering cat, or hold its cigarette too high like a woman. It was not human, did not dream of warm washed skin, but it was no mere object either. In those days, it gathered my friends and me in the secondhand smoke of what we took to be the city's hippest bar, and kept us there a good long while. In this pocket of carcinogens, we rounded up our scorn for it, the Hummer, which had made of guzzling a national virtue and a human right, which was, or so we'd heard, difficult to maneuver, stop, and store. And I think that maybe I can see now how things were then, me slim and spry and nodding, folding myself without consequence into the night never ending, while the cold, clean air of a most certain war waited on nobody and on nothing outside. These many years later, my youth and the cultural moment for deriding the Hummer have both wandered away gone. The Hummer out of production, other enormous SUVs, an unremarkable feature of our streets, we have taken to demarking this America as hostile to that one, using different instruments instead. Things have changed, time has passed, or some such sentence I am reluctant to write. In the present, I gesture to the everyday proof of my own time passing, the existence of my child, the occasional experience of temporal dissonance that comes with accruing age. These days, I push my toddler son home from daycare in a stroller, passing by the empty parking lot of the VFW, and feel with the closing of my throat the meaning of our age difference and the urgency of determining what it is I need to tell him. Let me tell you about my youth, I start out, an old man turning without fanfare to topics of great importance, his recollections riding confident thrusts of bad breath. When I was very young, inevitability was everywhere, I say. Our vehicles would only get bigger. Our soldiers would go to war. But what follows is necessarily a stammering. In The War at Home, a documentary about anti-war protests on the University of Wisconsin campus during America's war in Vietnam, a white male police officer beats a white male college student with his baton in a corner of Ingram Hall that I, a student there some 30 years later, recognized only as the location of my favorite ATM. What I mean, perhaps, is that this war had been built on that one, that both are unending, that I was in my time and of my time, but that I was also standing with hand held out to clasp a brand new 20, one world away from war's violence. In March of 2003, I protested the American invasion of Iraq under a statue of Abraham Lincoln, turning green from contact with old air and old time. And we, the small but angry crowd of college students, sparked fear in the heart of no one. We didn't succeed in drawing masses up from Library Mall and onto Bascom Hill, and we didn't produce swells that dropped down to collect thousands of others. This war, as everyone knew then, was already going to happen. Student reporters covering the protest wrote then that folly was a rational human being resisting a war founded on facts, that this war would make the world a much safer place. And what I remember most about these days is that I spent them gasping, unable to believe how quickly and with what ease the story had already been written. But here I'm also at risk of suggesting, in that sly, self-interested way of memory, that in the year 2003, I was all of these things: young, pretty, right. What really lingers, I think, what needs to be said, is that the time took care of the distinctions I thought I was making on that day and in the days that followed. I couldn't or didn't hold on to the facts forever. And time would take care of my need to yell, too. The year slowly turning that red-hot pool of protest into a resigned and almost pleasurable sipping, the satisfaction of being informed in some highly informed place, the kind of coffee shop in the kind of neighborhood, in the kind of city where we will all know the numbers, at least 200,000 Iraqi and Americans dead, but continue to measure our mornings in cupped silence, in clinks of spoon on saucer, in the privilege of sipping hot beverages over the terrible news of the day. But I should start again. The story begins when I leave the protest, when I cease being a campus protester, when I cease worrying my parents, when I head to a parking lot where a young man, exotic with waspiness, waits for me in the NPR of his black Honda Civic. I bounce on into the passenger seat, my adrenaline still flowing from having yelled atop the puffed up chest of my university, and I show him the homemade sign in my hand. Send students abroad, not soldiers. I cannot recall his response, but I know for a fact that I say to him next, as if confessing a pleasure I couldn't resist. And then I think we roll down the hill, past the view of the lake and toward the dim lit warmth of some cheap bar or restaurant, all the while feeling electric and elated for having found one another in such interesting times, for having happened upon the soft youth of the other while we were both lingering at the exact same center of the universe. Now, as the car rolls away, I see failure of imagination flowing from the tailpipe. I see how I thought I'd just been successful in going on record, how I thought I'd driven something immutable about myself into waiting ground. The war would happen, yes, but history would show that I'd been on the right side of it. And this identity, this having been against, would save me somehow, would absolve me of the complexity, the narrative to come. When I wanted to stop the war, I thought I wanted the impossible. But what I could not see then was that it was my second choice desire, the one I wanted fulfilled if the first could not be met, that reeked of fantasy, that I would somehow be excised from the horror of my country's wars, that I would somehow be lifted free by dint of my virtue and special feeling, of any obligation or responsibility, that I would have what no one could or should, a license to ignore the inhuman in me always. Let me tell you, I say to a son who lives in soft new skin, who runs away from me often, but who always comes back for more words, his mind sussing out the matters of the world. This a munching squirrel, that a big oak tree. We don't put that in our mouths. We don't stand on the table. We are gentle with our faces. There's so much to explain. But there's also the problem of knowledge falling apart, of stories losing arrangement over time. After college and in the fall of 2003, I left the country to take a job teaching English to French school children in a small community in rural Normandy. There, on the second week of classes, one of the teachers pulled me aside to present me with a large stack of what in my own school days we called weekly readers, newspapers written especially for school children about the news of the day. He fanned them a bit, each of them containing a headline about America's war in Iraq before dropping them in the arms of his assistant. "It might help you to read these," he said, "so you can see how we explain your war to the children." For the rest of a long, lonely year, the papers gathered dust and junk in the corner of my tiny one-room apartment, reminding me of the moment in which I'd received them. I'd lie on my foam mattress on the floor, eye level with that stack of papers, attempting to find reasonable words for my indignation, the perfect French for what could have been my most eloquent defense. "Thank you, Monsieur Vivien. I was against this war," I could have begun, but didn't. "J'étais contre cette guerre, Monsieur Vivien." But then the words would fail to come together in any honest way, and I'd have to shift tactics and begin somewhere else, further back, with the story of my life, with history as I understood it, with more failures of speaking and thinking. Perhaps I'd said nothing because I didn't have anything to say, or because I couldn't, in that moment or any of the moments that followed, find a single fail-proof way in which the war wasn't mine. And poor Monsieur Vivien, who had not been told in advance who I was, who could not be expected to gather, not even from his years of watching American movies, that I was Jenny in Forrest Gump before all the drugs crept in. That while I was in his classroom leading the children in a chant of 1, 2, buckle my shoe, I was also charging, with Robin Wright's exquisite cheekbones, across the reflecting pool of the National Mall in a billowing white dress. The story might also begin more recently, with me standing in an off-season curling club, its huge concrete floor now awash with used children's goods being sold on consignment. Here, I'm whipping through a rack of clothing when I come upon a toddler t-shirt that all but drains the blood from my heart, still in its original tags, marked organic cotton. The shirt's lone screen-printed image is that of a Hummer, the word bummer appearing in large letters beneath. I hold the shirt in my hands, where at first I revile it for being a 15-year-old joke never once washed or worn, but where soon enough it begins pointing its uselessness at me, and something very low thuds inside. On the sales floor, I think I see how things really were then, or what it was we'd been making this whole time. The Hummer, t-shirts making fun of the Hummer, wars. In fact, the story of my youth in its entirety appears to have finally turned up here, in this used up mountain of self-styled things, the tangled work of so many hands, a history from which no person or object is free. I try for the slip of 1 second to imagine pulling the Hummer t-shirt, emblem of my inevitable youth, down over the soft belly of my son. But what I find myself imagining instead is taking him captive, tying him to a chair with the thickening strap of my cautionary tales about things that idle like life or like death, but on and on and on, about my shame and its engine, about how even now, in a loosened state of regret, I stand ready to keep a comforting distance between myself and my power, about everything that goes missing each time a story begins. Let me tell you about my youth, I might say, breezy this time, a middle-class mother pushing her son under flowering trees, home from the good daycare she can pretty much afford. I was the 4th child, born to a milk hauler and a homemaker. I was raised among grandmas and grandpas, green hills and long valley views, wood chopping, sweet corn shucking, hee-haw, Hot Wheels, and hot rods. I was born into dairy. The birth took 20 minutes, and then I went to college. I turned up to campus, a knee-wobbling calf, and there began licking salt from the desks and chairs and the floors, from the faces of weary professors, from the bindings on every single book. In fact, I filled a forgotten corner of the library's stacks with hay and slept there most nights, curling my youth into the wisdom of the world already written. A cow? The sun ventures, but my knuckles whiten as I tighten the stroller's course, people will tell you stories. So I have 5 to 10 minutes, around 5 or 10 minutes left. Let's see here. I think I will read some new work. I'll finish with just an excerpt from an essay I recently finished called School Children. And I hope that this doesn't go too long. I'm not a great judge of how long it takes to read something. So this is an essay I just finished that is kind of about settler colonialism and about how we learn history as children, and sort of the odd combination of passing along sort of harmful and truncated conceptions of history to children at the same time, at a period in children's lives when they are so actively and deeply trying to make sense of the world. So I was really trying to capture those two things in this essay called School Children. We came into this world creatures of the yellow school bus, bouncing from seat to seat, screeching open windows one by one, letting loose the long blasts of our barn lowing. As creatures, we didn't possess knowledge of history so much as knowledge of habitat, which we blithely extended all the way back to the bright dawn of time. Time began here with us, the yellow bus quaking our small bones as we rumbled together down the same line. We took this bus to and from school, a sometimes cold, sometimes hot pocket of yelling, of disparate causes and declared allegiances, of different home lives roiling together in a peerless mix. And we took it on field trips, though these were a different affair, having the feel of momentous pursuit, the air of all of us at long last getting somewhere. At the helm of the bus, making the wide turns, sat Bill or Bob, Marv or John, a man in late middle age who knew all the country roads, who each morning came in from the quiet and kept a practical distance. What did he do while we were away? While we trampled the capital city or gawked at the zoo animals gawking back at us? We located intrigue in the flattest of mysteries and comedy in the smallest irregularities, and so found something of interest in his oily bald spot, his unmatched socks, his 2 sausage sack lunch. He's dead now, I assume. In the long tradition of narrative recollection, it's customary to acknowledge, however briefly, the way time has come for people we remember, to create a nostalgic distance into which we plop the wry bottom of our somehow still being alive. Time came for Bill, Bob, Marvin, John, but he took away his secret life and buried it, the way reliable people once did, back in something like the good old days. What remains is the memory of his driving, the ghost of his navigation, the surprising image of him once again climbing the stairs to start the bus. See how we careen from one side of the road to the other. See how we gun up the side of long grass ridges, cutting across property lines, thumping through cornfields, sending cows in clumsy clamoring flight, while we, children now 30 years on, hold tight to our loosening bodies, our falling faces, the fresh resignation of our unremarkable lives. See how we wait for the situation to straighten itself out. In life, no one drove this way, our small bodies still promising something, our lunches gently trembling together in a cardboard box, a smooth brown cornucopia of ding-dongs and orange pop. But then everything happens in 2 times, then and now, and each of these times is simultaneous and scattered and waiting to be reined in, to curl in the soft mania of a single hand. I move forward with these irregular ghosts so that I might ride for some time on interest and innocence and confusion, so we might see where things take us or find some purpose in remembering. There was a time when light could flicker inside a tire on the school playground, and we, the children, would spend weeks recording hopeful observations in notebooks, threading each apparition of light with elaborate stories, alien sightings, communication from above or below, some creature in possession of the very urgent need for us to know. On the bus, I couldn't see what unfurled beneath or what came up ahead, but there too I was alive to the world's hidden messages. I looked out the window, but kept an eye on the grown-ups, watching for inadvertent signs of secrecy or discomfort. Information I used in placing one like thing with another, in sifting and sorting, in amassing an impressive workload before falling each night into pulsating sleep. On field trips, we crowded the doorway of our representative at the state capitol, where she stood in sensible blue, imparting to us the surprising importance of our visit, the great democratic purpose of the boisterous echo our bodies produced in sober stone hallways. When we went to the old Indian agency house, the docent presented before the wrought iron tools of the kitchen's hearth and underscored just how idle American lives had become, just how much we owed to the hard-working settlers who had come before. For years, we'd been watching America's Funniest Home Videos, growing mute and doughy when we might have been out stacking wood, mugging for the camera, taking our silent, stoic place in the nation's great story. We also went to the nearby water park several weeks before summer would begin, and there we skittered down the frigid waters of the lazy river. Often we ate our lunches on the ground near effigy mounds. Terrestrial birds, panthers, bears, and other animals or spirits built into the land between 700 BC and 1100 AD by ancestors of the Ho-Chunk. We wondered if there were human bones inside, but could not see cosmology or ideology, could not really wonder what worlds we lived in. Enter now the ding-dongs, borne to our laps on a wave of euphoric cheers. Enter now the fizzing cans of lukewarm pop. We're sitting Indian style in what might have been a World Heritage Site, the center of the most effigy mounds ever built anywhere by anyone. But we remain Pied Pipers of a jumbled past, joined by a growing crowd of poorly understood ghosts, animated as if in an old Disney movie, our shadows thick and dark and emerging from the story's thinnest and most thrilling line, the music hinting at something sinister. We have brontosauruses and cowboys and Indians and dangerous animals of the forests. We have pioneers and cavemen with clubs, plus the first fish to grow legs and crawl without eyelids up onto the land's shore. We have Washington and Jefferson and Franklin, just as we have Father, Son, and Holy Ghost. In the crowd, a French mouse scurries about in tiny feathered hat, climbing atop shoulders, holding forth from on high. The future, it's a field trip, no? And I'll stop there.
Well, so this would be the time when we'd encourage questions from those of you who are joining us on the live stream. Krista, I will report to you that Jamie Barber writes, quote, "Creatures of the Yellow School Bus," close quote, love that line. So a question actually that I have for you, I'll just jump in here, is not about something that you've read, but is about something in the book, which is the essay Animals, which I gave to my students and have also kind of posted online so that people could take a look at it. And it's such a kind of clear-eyed and brutal and funny depiction of pregnancy and then labor and delivery. And I was curious if you were resistant to writing about your experience with pregnancy, and if you were resistant, kind of how you worked through that experience.
I don't know if I was resistant. I think at first it was difficult to do. It seems as if there's a lot of really sort of pleasant and beautiful and, moon goddess kind of writing around pregnancy. And I didn't want to do that. And I also didn't want to be extremely, brutal and thoughtless and not reflective of the beauty and joy of being pregnant. But I think what I finally alighted upon is just wanting to be able to write about how bizarre it is, right? And how much you learn about bodies, whether they're human or animal, yours or other people's, right? It's like, I guess if you experience chronic pain or something like that, your body is not an abstraction to you. But, if pregnancy takes the abstraction of your body just right out of the equation, it's like, I read an essay somewhere where this woman actually wrote that part of what is really powerful and kind of terrifying about childbirth is like the experience of something physical just coming for you, but it's within your own body and you can't stop it. And this might be kind of dark, but that is like one of the closest experiences and most approximate experiences to what death might feel like. Right. So it's very, very grounding. I'm someone who tends to be like in my head, like I'll forget to eat something or I'll read a book before I go exercise, and so for me, it really forced me to confront the weird animal that is me and everyone. Yeah.
Right. It felt incredibly familiar to me when I read it. It's part of what really struck me about it was just how well it captures all of those ranges of experience. So I was grateful for it.
Yeah, and some people, I think some people respond to it that they don't like it because they feel like it's like a negative portrayal, which is not at all what I was feeling or trying to do. Yeah.
We have another comment from Nina Forsyth, who wrote of school children, love that ending. And then Jordan, who introduced you earlier, writes, loved that ending. I especially love the style of your writing. It's not the formal, dull essays we learned in high school. How did you develop your creative style for essays?
That's a hard question. I have written other places, but we'll say it again, that I initially, I wanted to be a writer since I could read, really. And I always wrote stories when I was little and went to college and took creative writing classes and all of that. And I would write stories, and turn them into workshop and things like that. And I feel a little bit as if I was always sort of performing writing a little bit, where I was like, here, I can write these really pretty sentences and I'm going to trot them out and sort of wait for the world to admire them or something, because I had, growing up, I had gotten attention for, being a good writer as a kid. And so I loved reading and was really passionate about it. But I think that it was fairly false until in my early 20s, maybe 24, 25, I started reading more just nonfiction of all stripes, mostly literary nonfiction, mostly essays or prose poems. And the whole world just kind of opened up to me. And I just realized that I had found the genre in which I could do the things that I needed to do and that were interesting to me. So that was sort of the foray where it was like suddenly I'd found the right musical instrument, after like being really bad in the marching band for a long time, So, and then really, I think things just went from there. I think in terms of finding my own style, I think it was fairly unconscious. And I think it's this crazy amalgamation of all of the things that I grew up reading, that things that I read, coupled with what everyone has, which is this one really strange and unique take on the universe. So it's not a super satisfying answer, but it's an answer.
So you mentioned finding the instrument, right? And earlier you quoted Michael Martone, who blurbed your book. But do you just have an example of one of those essays, one of those, kind of creative nonfiction pieces that you found and that hit you over the head?
Oh, shoot. Now you're going to really put me on the spot. Well, I remember one thing that I did that was really exciting to me at first is I read just this anthology of really extremely brief nonfiction, like 1 to 2 page things. And I think it was the concision that really appealed to me. And then I also remember early on reading Housekeeping by Abigail Thomas, which is it's kind of like a memoir told in these half-page increments. So that really was like a light bulb. Annie Dillard's writing was definitely like a huge thing. And I think those were the early stuff that really made me realize that there was this whole history of people, it's not like, creative nonfiction is now a thing and you can get an MFA in it or what have you, but it's not new. And, it was what made me realize that people had been writing in this vein for a really long time. So, yeah.
Thank you for that. Well, we have a lull in the questions. Is there other things that you might feel that you'd like to comment on, or other directions that your work is taking in addition to school children?
I think that I don't know. I think the work is getting a little bit weirder. I think that maybe that's true for a lot of people, and maybe you get to a certain point where you've got the confidence to do that, or you just really you're not thinking about reception, or you're not thinking about publication. You just have realized that the only thing that really matters is, the joy of doing the work, and that is a wonderful realization to come to. So
that's great. We do have a question. Nina Forsyth writes, in your first piece especially, it seems that you are attempting to be deeply honest, or maybe comprehensive. Which do you think it is?
Oh boy. Well, comprehensive is like a torture thing for me because I tend to be somewhat perfectionistic and worried about not being able to adequately represent the entire universe or all possible arguments or worldviews. So I think it is really, if anything, it's where the two things meet, right? So it's like, here's a very earnest and attempt at being honest that I am at the same time acknowledging is a limited worldview, but not in a way that's like satisfied with that limit, but which is somewhat, you know, uncomfortable with itself.
Well, that might be our last question of the evening. Krista, thank you so much for being with us. We're grateful to have you here, and I have been deeply grateful for your work. You know, being able to read it in the past, past few months. So, congratulations on the publication, and you know, we're glad that you were able to be with us.
Yes, thank you so much for having me. This has been really fun.